Channel 7, this is Viewpoint.
Good morning and welcome to Viewpoint. I'm Joe Paris. We're about a month into the Idaho legislative session, and there is already a huge collection of topics that lawmakers are mulling over. But one sector getting a lot of attention, education in Idaho. Lawmakers are talking about their budgets, teacher pay, if guns should be readily available on campus, content in the libraries, in the classroom. I could go on, but you get it. There's a lot of topics. So as lawmakers do their work, this week on Viewpoint, we're getting the pulse of Idaho education with the state's top education official. My guest this week, Superintendent of Public Construction, Debbie Critchfield. She and I had an extended interview covering a lot of ground on all those hot topics, and we begin the conversation about the funding formula for Idaho schools and how Superintendent Critchfield sees the complicated equation.
We're really focused on funding, and the term that we're using is modernizing funding. It hasn't had a real serious look in more than 20 years. I think this last year, when money was left on the table, we had a huge investment or a promise of an investment to our schools. We returned to a different way of calculating how we fund students. We left about $162 million of that promised amount on the table. And so we're saying, not only do we think that that money needs to go to the schools as was promised, but also let's take a look at how we're overall funding our schools.
And how do you think the funding formula should work at this point?
Well, we want to pay for the students that you have. And so one of the things that we're really emphasizing in this modernizing funding is to understand that there should be a base amount, that when you have a student that shows up at school, there's a base amount attached to that. Some of our students take a little more resources, a little more time. If you are a special ed student, for example, there's a little bit more involved. And so what we're proposing and what we recommended in our budget would be to layer on top of that weight for the type of students. Weight is in W-E-I-G-H-T. Weight that amount and give a little more for the students that cost a little more. This is a big shift, but we believe it's how we get to how we want to fund our students.
And when we talk about, making sure that buildings are standing, that teachers are paid, that resources are in the classroom, I mean, how crucial is it at this point in time that schools are appropriately funded?
It's always crucial. So that's not different. But I think having a conversation last year and seeing the gaps of going from funding strictly by enrollment to returning back to attendance identified some of those areas where we can improve. If you have students that aren't at school, you still have fixed costs. I think we all recognize that. You're still paying your heat, you still have a building, you still have all of those things. Now, we also recognize that if the student isn't, we've got to create a system that funds for the student that you have, the type of student that you have, but also drives towards incentivizing schools to make sure kids are there. We want to find that balance.
And I've heard this phrase, outcome-based funding.
Yeah.
What does that mean to you? What does that mean in this conversation?
That we're paying for outcomes. I think that we expect that anyway, but nothing about our current funding system has promoted that or honored what we expect our schools to be able to do. And so what we've also proposed in this that would be very different and very new is tying certain outcomes to funding. Very closely looking, mirroring how we do literacy dollars. So there's about $72 million that go into literacy. You get a certain amount to help all kids. You get a little extra more if they have certain needs, and we're driving towards those outcomes in literacy. Well, we want to also have that same focus on math. I'm a big proponent. I'm talking a lot about getting back to basics. And so how do we drive those outcomes, drive the growth and the achievement that we want? Well, we want to fund you for your results. And so we're requesting $40 million into the public schools budget to create that environment.
And how would you evaluate achievement in terms of the average student in Idaho public schools at this point?
For reading, we're doing pretty well. We were steadily growing, particularly during the COVID time, and I think when you look nationally, Idaho is above the pack. And I really attribute that to the fact that we were, by and large, face-to-face for most of that school year. That matters. That made a difference. We're not as shiny when it comes to our math scores, particularly in grades 5 through 9. And so we're looking at a lot of ways to do this, not only associating money and funds with it, but also taking a look at what we're asking our kids to be able to know and do, what's appropriate. There's a lot of great math things out there, but what are those essential skills that we want our students to know at the appropriate grade levels?
And I've spoken with some teachers in recent years that say, the real influence of STEM and, the STEM and M and math,
Yes.
kind of tricking kids into doing math. With the modern student, I guess, how do you kind of trick these students into thinking, it's not just doing a Pythagorean theorem on paper. This matters because you can do X, Y, and Z with it.
It's that age-old question of, when am I ever going to use this?
Yeah.
So speaking of the Pythagorean theorem that I can barely say, I didn't use that yesterday, and I might not use it today, but I'm using math everywhere else. And I think that that's kind of what you're talking about with tricking students, that math is everywhere. I think so many of us carry our own baggage about math into it, and you may or may not have parents that are strong in math, and so that may also make you feel less confident. And so as we start at our very earliest ages to help them see, this is math, this is what math looks like. One of the reasons I was such a proponent of getting financial literacy into our schools was that it is math, it's not algebra, but being able to calculate where your bank account is, that's important math.
And I think people that might have missed this, legislation was passed last year, correct me if I'm wrong, that says, hey, we're going to have financial literacy in class. And I spoke to people in the community, adults, who said, I thought we were already doing this.
In some ways it was happening. Some districts maybe had classes or pieces of it, and there were little strands of it broken out across a whole variety of math courses. But what we did last year was say, we think this is important enough to be standalone, that there are a lot of topics related to personal financial management that all need to get grouped together so that a student doesn't leave our system and say, yeah, I never learned how to calculate interest, and I don't understand how to figure out taxes. Now we put that all together.
Those are great skills.
They're vital skills.
Oh, yeah. It's been a few weeks since Governor Little announced in his State of the State this big idea to invest millions or billions of dollars into Idaho physical buildings for education. In turn, it would help pay for education in the sense that it would also be a property tax thing. Now that's kind of, the dust has settled for a few weeks. What are your, impressions on it? What type of feedback have you heard?
Great feedback. I believe that there is a tremendous amount of support to address this, and it also touches onto the side of local property tax relief. I think that we've got two really strong avenues to accomplish some of the needs that we have for our facilities. We've got aging facilities, deferred maintenance. I believe in the adage that deferred maintenance is deficit spending. We see that if we continue to put this off over time, that we're going to be at some critical places. Very happy, very supportive to see what the governor had proposed and put forward. And I think as he and the legislature kind of work through some of the details of what that will look like, we'll get behind that effort.
And I know that there's some conversations around the state of Idaho in terms of what does the school week look like in terms of budgeting. I know in Nampa they're discussing different ideas. Up in Jerome they're discussing different ideas. I understand in Jerome there was some type of a student or a teacher protest where they didn't show up to work. At this point, I guess as districts are trying to balance their budgets and figure out the best way to bring their students to school, what general guidance is out there from your office?
Well, thank you for asking that question, and you wouldn't know that just yesterday, which would be, anyway, this week, we've put together some guidance information for our districts that are contemplating 4-day weeks. We know that there are districts who are already in a 4-day, and then many more, again, because of just different budget scenarios, are thinking, well, maybe this is the solution to our budget problem. How I led the letter was, please don't consider this if you are thinking that's going to save you money. 4-day weeks don't save money. The bulk of the money involved in a school district budget is related to your staff. They're contracted. Unless you're planning on laying off all of your staff, a significant number of your staff, you're not going to save money. And so I hate to see that be how we step into this conversation. So we put some information out. If you're thinking about 4-day, here are things to consider. I don't think it should be driven by the adult workforce. We need to first, middle, and last be thinking, what's the best thing for our kids? And then enter into it. It needs to be a public conversation. You need to involve the community. And frankly, if you're considering a 4-day, I think your community needs to be aware that not only will your days be longer, but you will likely go longer into the calendar year. You may be going into June. So there's a lot of considerations not just, hey, how do we think that we can save money? And then again, what's that focus on your student achievement? It's about the kids. This is why we exist.
Because I've seen a great question out there. In Idaho, is it, I guess, for a student to finish the school year, is it hours in the seat? Is it days in the seat? How does Idaho do this?
Yeah, I'm not in love with how we currently do it. It's been on the books, since the 60s, but it is currently by hours and well, excuse me, by minutes. And so that is how our districts calculate that. And so in an example of a district who had, a few years ago, we had all these crazy snow days, and we started off this school year, after the break, looking like districts might have to make some time up. So they may tack on 5 or so minutes to be able to get to the minutes and the hours that are required. But when we sit down and we really put into columns, here's 4-day, here's 5-day, we want to make sure that we're not shorting kids, even though your day is lengthened. I think adding 10, 15 minutes onto a day and then going 4 days is very different than missing out on 30 school days of very dedicated instruction. So we put that out there, not to say you shouldn't think about it or talk about it, but please don't rush into these decisions. They don't get unwound very easily.
And I know that your office is a huge supporter of local control, but as you highlighted, this is a very intricate, complicated decision that could have big ramifications.
Absolutely, and I really view what our office does, what our team provides, is that support to help with the informed decision making. We'll support and protect local control. I served on a local board myself, so I understand where that balance is, but I also know that it's helpful and nice when you're getting into some of these conversations to look around and say, who else has done this? How do we learn from this? What were the pitfalls? And I certainly don't want other districts to feel like, well, neighboring districts are all going to 4-day. I guess we need to start talking about it. No, think of your district and your students as your own little niche and what makes sense for you and your community.
When I was speaking with Governor Little a few weeks ago, obviously a big topic of conversation was teacher pay. He had touched on his State of the State address that Idaho has worked to increase teacher pay. At the same time, though, he told me that he knew in the recent past there's been teachers that go over to Wyoming or go over to Oregon and Washington. At this point, how do you keep, I guess, the best teachers here in the state of Idaho?
I think there's two pieces to this, and our districts that really feel that pressure and that strain are the border districts that have to be more competitive than just other districts that are in the heart of Idaho. I think there is a qualitative side to this that we don't talk about as much as the financial side. Our state has done a terrific job in bringing salaries up. Last year, a great investment into teacher bonuses, putting that into teacher salaries. But then what are we also doing to support teachers and the quality of the profession? Are we talking about education and how valuable educators are in our communities? I know our teachers really feel beat down quite a bit. It's more challenging than ever to be in a classroom. We see more classroom behavior disruptions. Teachers don't get prepared for that. We see more and more aspects of, I guess, the role of a family being pushed onto the schools. They're not equipped, they're not prepared for that, and then it comes with it an associated criticism. So one of the things I'm really talking about in all of this, what's the job of the school? That's not our job, this is our job. Then how do we put resources, time, attention, support to what our job is, and then help facilitate good things that aren't the jobs of the school? I think that goes towards this whole value proposition.
We've got to take a real quick break here on Viewpoint, but we will continue our conversation with Superintendent of Public Instruction, Debbie Critchfield, right after this.
All I do is win, 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 no matter what. All I do is win, win. Everybody hands go up. All I do is win, 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 no matter what. Got money on my mind.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'll get right to the point. It's the President's Day Super Sale at Denver Mattress.
Madam President, what's that mean for the average American?
It means saving $100 off every $1,000 you spend.
And Tempur-Pedic?
With bipartisan support, we've allocated a $300 gift with a purchase of any Tempur-Pedic.
And how will the people pay for these so-called savings?
Try 6 years no interest and free shipping. The President's Day Super Sale, on now at Denver Mattress.
I have 2 girls. We've been just trying to build our dream home. We had this really awkward bonus space. I just didn't know what to do with it. California Closets came in and they created something out of nothing. My girls hang out there a lot. While I'm doing my laundry, they're there playing. I love that I have a space now that I can create lasting memories as a family. I'm Jeannie, and this is my life with California Closets.
Visit a showroom or schedule your free consultation today.
Let's get on to it, yeah.
Let's do it.
The news at 4 is all new.
Welcome to the News at 4. I'm Brenda Rodriguez.
And I'm Joe Paris.
With a new duo. The latest local, regional, and national news. Your first alert weather forecast.
72 hours at least of some busy conditions.
And up-to-the-minute breaking news.
We begin with some breaking news here this afternoon.
If it happens that day, you'll see it first at 4. News at 4. Weekdays on KTVB, Idaho's News Channel 7.
All I do is win, 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 no matter what. Got money on my mind.
Hey, welcome back to Viewpoint. We continue our conversation with Idaho's top education official, Superintendent of Public Instruction, Debbie Critchfield. And we continue our interview with a huge pitch at the State House, tax credits for education. And this idea follows the school voucher debate from last year. So is this a new angle with the sure winner, or is this maybe a pass?
Going back to the legislature, I guess sticking with the legislature, big idea was kind of discussed in committee yesterday, this idea of $5,000 tax credits for families across Idaho for, I believe, for educational expenses, school expenses, which does include private school tuition. We saw this kind of get a run last year. What are your thoughts on this pitch? A little different than what we saw.
It is different, and like others, we were able to see, because of the process, now there is a bill that's been drafted, and we're able to take a look at it. And so for me, at the first, we were really focused on sort of philosophical points of a checklist that I have, and now I can lay that on top of the bill and say what boxes are checked here. So the first thing that I start out with when I look at any of this is it's not just simply a philosophical point, but I absolutely defend and will promote a parent's right to choose where their child gets their education. Nothing about this bill touches that. It doesn't make it, it doesn't increase it, it doesn't diminish it. And so if it doesn't increase where I personally feel our focus needs to be, then I start to look and say, what are some of the things that it doesn't do? I don't know that having a bill put forward that doesn't predominantly focus on needs-based. That was a concern that I had when I looked at that. Only a small portion of the dollars of the $50 million would actually be needs-driven. So then I have to ask myself, are we simply paying parents who are already sending their kid to a private school? Because really this is what that's about. You ask, or I ask myself, is it the government's role to pay for all of the choices? Again, coming back. So this process that I've had in my mind, I don't know that it does anything to promote more school choice. We already have it, but there are some things that concern me, taking away from the overall budget. Again, where's the accountability? So I have a lot of concerns.
Because in terms of tax credits, overall, I think the state would be giving $50 million back in tax credits, which is cutting $50 million from the top line of whatever.
Absolutely.
And that first $40 million is first come, first serve. And as you touched on, that $10 million is for needs-based. But I mean, $40 million for whoever comes up first. I mean, it's fair, but it makes you wonder, what else could you do with the money?
Well, yes, and I have ideas. And of course, directed towards, supporting some of these needs in public schools. I think an important lesson that we can learn when we look at other states, because we've had a lot of people come from out of state and say, hey, Idaho, how come you're not doing all these things? Look what our state has done. And so then we do look out and say, is there potential that this grows in a way that it is more of a strain on not just our budget, but again, taking money from the top, you're taking from corrections, roads, health and welfare, a variety, anything that the government supports. And so as I look at that, I don't know that all of my boxes got checked. There are some concerns, and so I guess we'll wait to see what the final bill looks like and where the legislature weighs in. But for right now, there's enough concerns that I have that I've got a lot of question marks.
Certainly keeping tabs, and as you know, as we all know, things will ebb and flow and go in a lot of different directions.
It's the legislative season.
It is. Speaking of the legislature, a very controversial thing that has come up, guns in the classrooms or training people to have guns. Do you think this is more of a local control thing, or does your office kind of have a general standpoint on it?
I absolutely think it's a local control thing. I don't think it's a gun thing, because guns are already allowed on school campuses. And in fact, in 2018, the legislature allowed or gave that authority to the local school board, who is in the best position in their community to know what their community expects, who their community members are. And so I start with that. When I hear people talk about it, it isn't an issue of whether or not we should or can have guns on campuses. We can currently do that, but who has the oversight of that? Where is that best suited? And as someone, again, that served on a local school board, I feel like that is stepping over the top of that ability that exists. And then I think recently having our School Resource Officer Association come out in opposition to the bill, those are the folks that are absolutely charged, that they are trained, they work with the school officials, they're a part of local law enforcement. You know, that gave me a little bit of pause. Everyone has important opinions, but when you get certain segments of people like SROs, we stop and say, okay, well, let's listen to what they're saying.
I guess the other side of these communities caring so much is you have all these local control conversations like guns, like content in school. In terms of the library conversation, I know that, you know, libraries are school libraries and community libraries, but in terms of the content, is that kind of the flagpole to your office right now, or is that kind of more of a local control thing?
Well, we certainly get all the questions, and like you're asking, how, you know, where does the SDE fit in there? One of the things that I've offered out to our legislators is to work with our library, our state library association. Could we develop standards around the types of books that come into classrooms? So there's already a legislative process that directs the adoption of curriculum that comes into the classroom. Could we take some of that and then apply it to some of the books that are in there or that are coming in there so that people feel like they're a part of the process? I think that we all agree we don't want pornography. There are books that are distasteful or of an adult content that we don't want in our libraries. I haven't heard of anyone say that to me. I think what the issue and where the challenge is how do we manage that, and who are the right people to do that? And I'm always of the opinion that when we open it up, bring in the community, have a process, here are the standards that we expect, that we'll get good results.
As you've highlighted, there's a lot of challenges and a lot of things to work through, but on the other end of it, you know, what excites you most about Idaho education right now?
I think the direction that we're going, I really feel like we've got this great momentum right now about what we can do and be, and again, getting back to basics, how we help support the basic fundamentals that we expect our students to have, and beyond just reading and math, and not that those are nothing, those are the two biggies. I increasingly hear individuals talk to me wherever I am about civics classes. And government. What do our students know about our own government? How do they feel about being a citizen? And what are we doing in our classrooms to really promote that?
Do you get to travel a lot this time of year, or are you kind of stuck in Boise because of the legislature?
We choose to be around Boise during the legislative time. So these 3 months, we don't venture too far away, not probably more than an hour any direction during these months. But then the rest of the year, we're out into classrooms, from the one-room classroom in Lowman to some of the biggest schools that we've got in our state.
That seems to be an exciting part of the job. If I were you, I'd look forward to, you know, post-legislature and say, can't wait to get around.
Absolutely. And then I'm also in the position to sort of translate or explain a lot of the things that happen during the legislative session, and we want to help that. What does this look like? But to go in and get into the classrooms, again, see the teaching, see families, see kids, how exciting it is to be in Idaho now.
Well, I think we got through all the business. I did have one last question for you. When you were in school, what was your favorite subject, or what was your favorite topic to study?
History.
Okay.
Social studies. Absolutely. There's just so much there. I always say that history isn't boring as how we teach it. Yeah. And so I'm always a big promoter when kids talk about history or some of those things. No, it's exciting. We love it, and I think I was blessed to have some really great teachers that not only taught it well, but just encouraged my interest in it.
And thank you again to Superintendent of Public Instruction, Debbie Critchfield, for her time this week on Viewpoint. We are going to wrap up this week's edition when we come back right after this commercial break.
Do you need to file for Social Security in the next few years? Well, it's a tricky decision. You only get one shot and you better get it right. Here to help is Tyson Thacker from Boss Retirement Solutions, a 5-time winner of the Best of State Award. And Tyson, why is filing for Social Security so complicated?
Good question, Nisha. You know, most people don't know, but claiming for Social Security is way bigger than just your benefits check. Depending on how and when you file, you could end up paying a lot more in taxes, not just on your Social Security benefits, but more taxes on your IRA and your 401k withdrawals. You could double your Medicare premiums, as well as forfeiting thousands of dollars each year in other benefits. And they only give you one shot. So you better get it right.
What a big decision. Okay, what can our viewers do to make their best decision as they file for Social Security?
You know, Nisha, the difference between your best and worst case scenarios could be hundreds of thousands of dollars of extra money in your pocket. And that's why we offer a free customized Social Security analysis that's based off of your situation, your taxes, your IRA and 401k, your own Medicare premiums, plus so much more, to help you know exactly when to file and how you could maximize your own personal benefits. Considering this is a 6-figure difference potentially in retirement, it's worth getting it right.
Tyson, thank you so much. Everybody, call now and learn how you can maximize your Social Security benefits with a free customized Social Security analysis from Boss Retirement Solutions. They've helped thousands of families get more income from Social Security. If you've saved at least $200,000 and have not filed for Social Security, schedule your free analysis by calling the number on your screen now. There's no cost or obligation, so call the number on your screen and get on their calendar now.
Well, thanks so much for joining us on this week's edition of Viewpoint. Something I did want to piggyback off of real quickly that the superintendent just mentioned is that it is a very difficult time for teachers to work in education. So thank you to all the teachers out there across Idaho's schools. We know that it is a very difficult profession, and we know coming out of COVID, it has been a lot of unexpected adventures. So we appreciate the teachers' work and the administrators' work across here in Idaho. Of course, if you ever miss any editions of Viewpoint, you can always find us on ktvb.com or on the KTVB YouTube page. As for politics, our team is following it daily down at the Idaho State House. You can check the politics section at ktvb.com for the latest on that controversial legislation that we talked about with Superintendent of Public Instruction Debbie Critchfield, as well as anything else upcoming. We know in the next few weeks there's going to be a lot of debates about the budgets and how they're actually going to do the budget, so we're expecting to jump into that with legislative leaders in the near future. Well, that's all the time we got for this week on Viewpoint. I'm Joe Paris. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next week. Have a good weekend.